A river in North Florida regularly vanishes into a hole in the ground. Not diverted, not dammed, but swallowed whole by the earth itself. The Santa Fe River, a major tributary of the Suwannee, flows for miles as a normal darkwater river, then abruptly pours into a gaping limestone maw at Oleno State Park. On one side of a natural land bridge, you see a river. On the other, a dry forested riverbed, eerily silent for 3 miles. The water has not evaporated. It has taken an underground shortcut. For kayakers approaching the chasm, the experience is unnerving. The current quickens, pulling them toward a vortex of logs and whirlpools. A sign warns them, river disappears from view. Turn back now. And yet people every year paddle right up to the edge, watching as a full-sized American river cascades into a feature simply called the river sink. Curious what you think about paddling a river that just ends. This is the detail that frames the entire story of Florida's hidden geology. The water that enters the river sink is not gone forever. It is simply on a journey through total darkness, and the mechanics of that journey reveal a truth about the entire state that is far more volatile, far more precarious than most people realize. To understand what is happening to Florida's water, you have to understand the ground beneath it. Florida is not built on solid rock. It sits atop a vast 100,000 square mile plateau of porous limestone, a geological formation known as karst topography. For millions of years, rainwater, made slightly acidic by carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, has seeped into this limestone. Dissolving it, it has carved a subterranean world of unimaginable scale. A Swiss cheese network of caves, conduits, tunnels, and caverns that stretches beneath the entire peninsula. This underground reservoir is the Floridan aquifer, the source of drinking water for tens of millions of people. And sometimes, the ceiling of that hidden world gives way. This is what has happened at Oleno State Park. The river sink is a massive breached sinkhole. The river flows along its normal path until it encounters this geological fault line, this direct drain into the plumbing of the aquifer. The water plunges downward, entering the Wakulla Sinks cave system, the longest underwater cave in the United States. For 3 miles, the entire Santa Fe River ceases to exist on the surface. It flows through a labyrinth of pitch-black, water-filled passages, invisible to the sun, silent to the world above. Then, 3 miles downstream, it bursts back into the light. At a place called the River Rise, the water surges up from the ground, reforming the river channel as if nothing ever happened. 2 separate state parks mark the phenomenon, one where the river dies, and another where it is reborn. This is not a slow seep. It is a violent, wholesale rerouting of a major waterway. The volume of water is immense, and the pressure is relentless. The elite cave divers of the Woodville Karst Plain Project, the WKPP, are some of the only humans to have ever seen this hidden world. They describe a high-flow, high-pressure system, a subterranean river pushing through conduits carved from ancient limestone. A world without light or life as we know it, save for the pale, blind creatures that have evolved in its depths. If you want to see more on how these underground systems are mapped, a subscription to the channel helps us make it happen. And the strangest part is not that one river does this. It is that many do. This is a statewide phenomenon. Zoom out 100 miles to the east, to Hamilton County, near the Georgia border. Here, another river performs an even more dramatic vanishing act. The Alapaha River, during periods of low flow, drains completely away into a series of sinkholes. The largest is called the Dead River Sink. It's an apt name. For a stretch of nearly 20 miles, the Alapaha's riverbed is just dry sand and cypress knees. Local folklore for centuries has told of the river simply dying, only to reappear miles away. And for centuries, it was right. The water plunges into the Dead River Sink, and another feature ominously named Devil's Den, entering the same Floridan aquifer system. From there, its journey is even longer and more mysterious than the Santa Fe's. It travels between 10 and 19 miles underground before it reemerges at the Alapaha River Rise, forcefully bubbling up to join the Suwannee River. Think about that. An entire river taking a 19-mile subterranean detour. For comparison, that's the distance from Midtown Manhattan to JFK Airport. Underground, it is a geological absurdity that happens with routine predictability. Rob Diaz de Villegas, of WFSU Public Media, once noted that residents of the Big Bend region know their state is one of dynamic karst activity, a place with more geology than it gets credit for. These disappearing rivers are the most visible proof, but these riverine sinks are just the opening act. To see the true scale, the true power of this phenomenon, you have to look northwest to a 4,000-acre basin just outside Tallahassee, Lake Jackson. This is where the script flips from a geological curiosity to a story of terrifying scale and acceleration. Lake Jackson is not a river. It is a shallow 4,000-acre prairie lake, a vast basin holding 12 billion gallons of water. Historically, the indigenous Muskogee people called it Okiheepki, which translates to disappearing waters. They knew its secret. For at least 2 centuries, Lake Jackson has been draining itself. Not slowly, not partially, but completely. The first officially recorded dry down was in 1829. Steamboats in the 19th century were sometimes left stranded permanently in the mud when the lake bottom gave out. On the floor of Lake Jackson lie 2 massive sinkholes, the geological equivalent of bathtub drains. The primary one is a 28-foot wide chasm called Porter Hole Sink. The other is Lime Sink. For most of the time, these holes are plugged with a thick layer of mud, clay, and sediment. The weight of the 12 billion gallons of water above is held in place by this fragile natural seal. But the seal's integrity depends on one thing: pressure from the Floridan aquifer below. When the region has plentiful rain, the aquifer is full and pushes up against the sediment plug, holding it in place. But when a drought hits, or when humans pump too much water out for cities and agriculture, the pressure in the aquifer drops. The upward force vanishes, and the immense downward weight of the lake water becomes unstoppable. The sediment plug fails. The result is one of the most incredible spectacles in the natural world. A 4,000-acre lake begins to drain like a colossal bathtub. A vortex forms over Porter Hole Sink, a swirling whirlpool sucking everything down into the earth: fish, turtles, plants, debris. In 1982, during a particularly dramatic dry down, eyewitnesses watched in horror as a full-sized American alligator was caught in the vortex and pulled, tail first, into the subterranean darkness. The story has become a local legend, a chilling testament to the power of the drain. It can take weeks or months, but eventually all 12 billion gallons are gone, funneled into that single 28-foot hole. The lake bed becomes a cracked lunar landscape of mud littered with the shells of dead mussels and stranded boats. A place that was a thriving aquatic ecosystem becomes a desert overnight. This is the part the headlines often miss. The water isn't lost, it is being routed. The question for decades was, where? In 2017, a team of scientists led by Dr. Sion E. McGlynn of McGlynn Laboratories decided to find out for good. They waited for the lake to drain and then performed one of the most audacious experiments in Florida's geological history. They poured 100 pounds of fluorescent tracer dye directly into the swirling maw of Porter Hole Sink. Then they waited. They set up monitors at every major spring in the region, testing the water for any trace of the dye. For weeks, there was nothing. The water, and the dye with it, was on a journey. It traveled south through the pitch-black, water-filled passages of the Wakulla Sink's cave system. It flowed beneath 19 miles of pine forests, highways, and neighborhoods. The journey was slow, averaging less than a kilometer a day. Then, on day 35, the fluorescent green signature appeared. It erupted from the main vent of Wakulla Spring, one of the largest and deepest freshwater springs on Earth. The mystery was solved. The water from Lake Jackson was not disappearing. It was moving, invisibly, 19 miles underground, to become the source of one of the world's most famous springs, a direct, proven, subterranean river connection. The paper Dr. McGlynn co-authored with Andrew W. Niederoda in December 2024, published in the Journal of Cave and Karst Studies, formally documented this incredible long-distance flow. If you think this subterranean river is wild, a quick like tells us you want more deep dives like this. The cycle of draining and refilling is a natural part of the lake's identity. What is not natural is the timing. For most of recorded history, from 1829 until the late 20th century, Lake Jackson followed a predictable pattern. It would dry down completely roughly once every 25 years. Drains were documented in 1907, 1932, 1957, and again in 1982. It was a generational event, a thing of local lore that your grandfather might have seen. Then in 1999, something changed. The rhythm broke. The lake drained that year, far ahead of schedule. Then it drained again just 2 years later, in 2001. Then again in 2006, in 2012, in 2021. And then it began a massive dry down in late 2025 that fully exposed the basin by the summer of 2026. The 25-year cycle had collapsed. The generational event was now happening every few years. The lake's biological clock was broken. The reason is the story of modern Florida. The state's population has exploded. The demand for water, for lawns, for agriculture, for industry, has put an unprecedented strain on the Floridan aquifer. When that pumping is combined with increasingly severe and frequent droughts, the pressure within the aquifer plummets. Guy Harley means the Florida state geologist has explained the mechanics. Repeatedly, he compares the aquifer to a checking account. When rainfall outpaces withdrawals, the account is solvent. But Florida has been running a water deficit for decades. The dry downs of Lake Jackson are becoming more frequent because the aquifer beneath it is being depleted faster than ever before. The natural buffer is gone. The lake is now perpetually on the edge of collapse, waiting for the next drought to pull the plug. A friend of yours might find this story as fascinating as you do. And with every collapse comes a strange and surreal aftermath. When the water recedes, it exposes not just mud, but history. The lake bed becomes a treasure hunter's paradise, a Jurassic Park, as some locals call it. Because Florida was once a shallow sea, the limestone is packed with prehistoric fossils. As the water vanishes, people flock to the newly exposed ground, scouring the mud around Porterhole Sink. They find the fossilized teeth of giant megalodon sharks. They find the massive molars of mastodons and the rib bones of ancient dugongs that once swam here. It's a paleontological free-for-all. But sometimes, what the lake gives up is more recent and more disturbing. During the dry down of June 2021, as the water level dropped day by day, something was found resting in the mud. Not fossils, 2 human skulls. The discovery sparked an immediate police investigation. The area was cordoned off. Was this a crime scene? The final resting place of missing persons. The truth, it turned out, was even older. Archaeologists were brought in and determined the skulls were ancient, belonging to indigenous ancestors. The lake was not a crime scene. It was an archaeological site. It had simply given up another one of its secrets, a reminder that people have lived and died by its volatile shores for millennia. Life, however, finds a way to adapt to even this level of chaos. While most fish are either sucked into the sink or become trapped in shrinking pools to be eaten by birds, one creature has evolved to master this cycle of appearance and disappearance. For years, biologists were puzzled by a tiny crustacean found in the lake. In June of 2022, John R. Cannizzaro and Thomas R. Sawicki finally published a paper officially describing it as a brand new species, Crangonix appalachii. This tiny amphipod is found nowhere else on Earth. It has evolved a unique survival strategy. When the 12 billion gallons of water vanish and the lake becomes a dry, cracked wasteland, Crangonix appalachii doesn't die. It burrows down into the moist sediment at the bottom of the sinkhole itself, enters a state of suspended animation, and simply waits. It waits for months, sometimes for years, in the dark mud until the rains return and the aquifer refills, plugging the hole and allowing the lake to be born again. It is evolution in real time, a life form engineered by chaos. This acceleration of the cycle is the real story, the part that connects the Santa Fe River vanishing into a hole, the Alapaha taking a 19-mile shortcut, and Lake Jackson draining itself onto the evening news. They are all symptoms of the same underlying condition. The plumbing of Florida is being pushed to its breaking point. The cautionary tale has already been written. Travel south to Polk County to the Peace River. There, a major waterway called Kissingen Spring once gushed millions of gallons of fresh water a day. But in the early 20th century, massive phosphate mining operations moved in. They began pumping billions of gallons of water out of the Floridan aquifer to support their mines. The pressure in the aquifer dropped. The spring's flow slowed. Then it faltered. By 1950, Kissingen Spring was completely dry. It has not flowed since. A major spring, a source of life for an entire river ecosystem, was killed by overpumping. It is a ghost spring, a permanent warning of what happens when the withdrawals from the aquifer become unsustainable. And now, all 5 of Florida's water management districts are under simultaneous water shortage warnings. The state is in a perpetual state of hydrological stress. The spectacular vanishing of a river or a lake is no longer just a geological curiosity. It is a warning light on the dashboard of an entire ecosystem. As Catherine Robinson, a local resident watching Lake Jackson vanish in 2021, told a reporter, "It dried up, my mother said when she was a kid once. Oh wow. I just can't believe what I'm seeing." The generational event has become a common occurrence. The unbelievable has become the expected. So, as we watch the Santa Fe River pour into the earth, we are not just watching a quirk of nature. We are watching a release valve, a system under immense pressure, finding the path of least resistance. Each time a river takes a dive underground, or a lake drains through its floor, it is a visceral reminder that the surface world we see is only half the story. The real drama is happening beneath our feet, in the dark where water, rock, and time are in a constant, delicate, and now dangerously imbalanced negotiation. The ecological impacts are immediate. Fish populations in Lake Jackson, the bluegill, the largemouth bass, are compressed into a few deep pools, leading to a feeding frenzy for wading birds and a subsequent population crash. The boat ramps at Falk Drive Landing end not in water, but in 10 feet of mud. The entire economy and ecology built around the lake is put on hold waiting for the water to return. But the question is no longer if it will drain again, but when and for how long. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission notes that the dry downs can actually benefit the lake's long-term health by exposing the bottom to sunlight, burning off excess muck. But this silver lining is cold comfort to homeowners whose lakeside property is now a view of a dust bowl, or to the system as a whole. The question buried deep in the data from the Florida Geological Survey and the Northwest Florida Water Management District is existential. If a natural cycle that was stable for 200 years can be broken in less than a decade, what does that mean for the future? How do you manage a water supply that can literally vanish overnight? What happens when a record-setting drought, like the one that triggered the 2025 to 2026 dry down, collides with a system already primed for collapse? For now, the river sink at Oleno State Park continues to swallow the Santa Fe River. The sediment plug at Porter Hole Sink will eventually reform, sealing the drain until the next pressure drop. And without a major tropical system, a single hurricane that could refill Lake Jackson in a matter of days, the basin will remain a dry, grassy field, a bizarre monument to the water it once held. Nobody can say when the plug will reseal. Nobody can say when the next drought will pull it again. And so, 3 questions hang over the entire state of Florida. Why is the ancient natural cycle of these disappearing waters accelerating so dangerously? How long can a state of 22 million people continue to draw its lifeblood from an aquifer that is visibly, dramatically, failing to keep its surface waters afloat? And what does it mean when the fundamental barrier between the world above and the world below begins to crumble? The water that vanished from the Santa Fe River this morning is right now moving through limestone conduits 3 miles to its rise. The water from the Alapaha is somewhere on its own 19-mile journey through the darkness, and the last 12 billion gallons from Lake Jackson are arriving, 35 days later, at the mouth of Wakulla Spring. The earth is still swallowing rivers. The aquifer is still falling to meet them. And somewhere in the Swiss cheese landscape of Florida, the next river is already finding its drain.